Right when Chicago was ready to pull the trigger on a blockbuster $20 million trade for an elite pass rusher, Ryan Poles suddenly slammed the phone down and froze every single deal. The entire league was left in absolute shock, but inside Halas Hall, coaches knew a quiet catastrophe was unfolding for opposing quarterbacks. Austin Booker didn't just pack on explosive power and dominate training camp. He transformed into an unblockable, three-down monster, winning every single one-on-one rep. Paying a high-priced veteran turned out to be completely pointless when a fifth-round steal was already delivering elite sack production for a fraction of the cost. Chicago didn't miss out on their next superstar defensive end. They just realized he was sitting on their roster the entire time. The silence coming out of Halas Hall wasn't just unusual, it was deafening. For weeks, the national media machine had been churning out endless trade proposals, linking the Chicago Bears to every available marquee edge defender across the National Football League. Analysts were practically begging general manager Ryan Poles to spend capital, arguing that Montez Sweat couldn't carry the pass rush burden alone, and that a legitimate, high-priced counterpart was the missing link to transform Chicago from a rising wildcard team into a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Front officers around the league were actively taking calls, agents were dangling their high-profile clients, and fan bases were endlessly refreshing social media feeds, anticipating a blockbuster move before the upcoming deadline. The market was set, the prices were established, and every executive in the league assumed Chicago was primed to make a splashy, aggressive move. Then, without warning, the line went dead. Ryan Poles abruptly cancelled scheduled calls with opposing general managers regarding expensive veteran acquisitions, effectively slamming the brakes on every active negotiation. Inside the front office war room, the whiteboards covered in contract projections and trade packages were wiped clean, leaving beat writers and national insiders completely baffled. Speculation immediately flooded the airwaves, with critics questioning whether the front office was getting cold feet, hoarding draft capital, or simply refusing to open the checkbook at a critical juncture in the franchise's trajectory. The outside narrative suggested hesitation or cheapness, but inside the building, the tone was completely different. The decision to pull back from the trade market wasn't born out of panic or frugality. It was born out of a realization that completely shifted the team's roster strategy. The stakes of this sudden maneuver could not have been higher. Choosing to stand pat in the modern NFL is always a massive gamble, especially when the dominant consensus dictates that a team is just one piece away from dominance. By calling off the search for pass rush help, the Bears' leadership was publicly tying their immediate destiny to an internal solution, putting their reputations directly on the line. If the pass rush stagnated, if opposing quarterbacks sat comfortable in clean pockets, and if the defense faltered under the weight of unfulfilled expectations, the blame would fall entirely on the shoulders of the decision makers who voluntarily opted out of the veteran trade market. The fans wanted a proven star, the media expected a headline, and the locker room needed to know that the front office was doing everything possible to win right now. Yet, deep within the private coaching offices at Lake Forest, the atmosphere was marked by quiet, unmistakable confidence rather than anxiety. Defensive coordinators don't walk away from proven $20 million edge rushers on a whim, nor do general managers tear up trade framework without definitive evidence. The abrupt freeze on all trade talks wasn't an admission of defeat. It was the direct result of tape that was being generated on the practice fields every single morning. Something seismic had changed in the dynamic of the defense, rendering every external option obsolete before a contract could even be drafted. Chicago didn't need to mortgage their future or swallow a massive financial burden to fix their edge rush because the answer had already emerged right in front of them, turning routine practice reps into a showcase of pure destructive dominance. The evidence behind the Bears' sudden pivot wasn't a matter of subtle projection or blind optimism. It was written in undeniable, explosive tape that had been building since the closing stretch of the previous season. After entering the league as an unpolished fifth-round lottery ticket, Austin Booker spent his sophomore campaign undergoing a relentless physical transformation. Sidelined early in the year by a knee injury, he returned for the second half of the season like a man possessed, stacking 4.5 sacks over 10 games and adding another crucial sack in Chicago's wildcard victory. But what transpired once the offseason hit was a complete mechanical overhaul. Booker altered his stance at the line of scrimmage, dropping his center of gravity to convert raw length into pure leverage and packed dense, lean mass onto his 6'5" frame. He didn't just bulk up, he evolved into a legitimate physical bully, arriving at training camp with a violence at the point of attack that caught veterans entirely off guard. When the pads finally popped in Lake Forest, camp reports quickly shifted from cautious praise to genuine shock at what the young edge rusher was accomplishing on a daily basis. In one-on-one pass rushing drills, Booker wasn't just holding his own, he was completely dominating the top of the offensive line unit. He routinely embarrassed starting caliber offensive tackles with a lethal combination of a refined long arm extension and a lightning quick cross chop move, blowing pass protection to generate multiple simulated sacks during full team situational periods. Left tackles walked away from reps, visibly frustrated, unable to anchor against the dramatic increase in his power. Every afternoon, the practice film revealed a defender who was consistently the first player off the snap, blowing up running plays 4 yards behind the line and collapsing pockets before route concepts could even develop downfield. By the time the front office reached the midpoint of camp, the tracking data inside Halas Hall painted an undeniable picture. Booker's year 3 leap was not an anomaly or a brief streak of good luck. His win rate against elite pass protection had skyrocketed, placing his daily practice metrics alongside some of the most productive starters in the entire league. Coaches were watching a 23-year-old draft steal routinely dictate the terms of engagement against first-team linemen, displaying a terrifying motor that never faded even in late practice red zone scenarios. The raw, bendy edge rusher, who had once relied purely on athleticism, had officially learned how to convert speed to power with surgical precision. Inside the executive suites, Ryan Poles and his staff recognized that they were no longer looking at a rotational depth piece who needed protection. They were looking at a primary defensive catalyst who was actively making every external trade target on their board look like an unnecessary, wildly overpriced distraction. The core conflict facing the Chicago front office came down to a cold, unyielding mathematical reality that dictates long-term success in the modern NFL. The friction between spending premium veteran dollars and unleashing elite production on a rookie contract. Across the league, teams routinely fall into the trap of overpaying for recognized names on the trade market, surrendering valuable draft capital and locking up over $20 million per year in salary cap space just to secure an edge rusher past his absolute prime. For months, the market insisted that Chicago needed to swallow that exact financial pill to solve their pass rush puzzle. But inside Halas Hall, the financial breakdown told a completely different story. Austin Booker was operating on a fifth-round rookie contract, delivering high-end starter metrics at a microscopic fraction of the price a marquee free agent or trade target would demand on the open market. Committing $25 or $30 million annually to an outside star would have immediately handcuffed the Bears' long-term roster construction, forcing painful compromises at other vital positions down the road. In an era governed by strict cap management, every dollar committed to an overpriced veteran pass rusher is a dollar stolen from future contract extensions for core homegrown talent. Chicago was rapidly approaching critical negotiation windows for several key contributors who represented the foundation of the franchise's rebuild. Throwing massive money at a short-term fix would have created a looming cap bottleneck, jeopardizing the team's ability to retain their young core while offering no guarantee that the incoming veteran would actually outperform the rising edge rusher already dominating their practice field every single day. When the front office evaluated Booker's game film against the available trade targets, the financial logic became overwhelmingly clear. Booker wasn't just matching the production of expensive veterans in camp drills. In many key metrics, his explosive athleticism, length, and relentless high motor pursuit were yielding superior results. Surrendering heavy draft compensation and taking on an inflated contract for equivalent or potentially lesser on-field impact was a direct violation of Ryan Poles' team-building philosophy. By choosing to unleash Booker as the primary starter opposite Montez Sweat, the Bears preserved massive cap flexibility, allowing the organization to operate with total financial freedom while maintaining an aggressive window to extend their top star players without suffering roster attrition elsewhere. The financial reality shifted the entire paradigm of the offseason, transforming what the national media viewed as a conservative gamble into a masterclass of salary efficiency and asset allocation. In the modern game, the single greatest competitive advantage a franchise can possess is an elite, high-impact pass rusher operating on a rookie-scale contract. It is the ultimate cheat code that allows general managers to build deep, balanced rosters without sacrificing top-tier play at high-value positions. Chicago didn't just avoid a costly trade mistake. They positioned themselves to maximize their championship window by placing their trust in a fifth-round steal whose rapid development rendered multi-million-dollar veteran contracts completely obsolete. The tactical reverberations of Austin Booker's physical and mental evolution triggered a fundamental shift across the entire defensive coaching staff, redefining how Chicago planned to attack opposing offenses. Head coach Ben Johnson and defensive coordinator Dennis Allen watched the tape and realized that keeping Booker in a limited situational pass rushing role was actively holding the team back. The coaching staff immediately restructured their installation plans, stripping away initial plans for a heavy veteran rotation and handing Booker the primary, undisputed first-team reps at defensive end. Dennis Allen's defensive system thrives on aggressive front four pressure without needing to constantly blitz linebackers, and Booker's rapid emergence provided the exact missing element needed to make the entire scheme lethal. What made Booker's rise so transformative for Allen's playbook wasn't just his ability to collapse pockets on third and long, but his sudden dramatic transformation into a complete three-down force against the run. Early in his career, scouts questioned whether his long, lean frame could hold up against heavy, interior power-running schemes. Booker answered those doubts emphatically in camp, using his extraordinary 33-inch reach to lock out pulling guards and set a hard, unyielding edge. Instead of getting washed out of plays, he was shedding blocks instantly, stringing out outside zone carries to the sideline, and stacking up tackles for loss during physical goal line and short yardage periods. He was no longer just a designated speed rusher entering the field on passing downs. He was setting the tone on first and second down, forcing offenses into long distance situations where the defense held every advantage. With Booker anchoring one side of the line and Montez Sweat dominating the other, Dennis Allen unlocked a level of schematic flexibility that defensive coordinators dream about. Booker's raw length and improved hand placement allowed him to slant inside on disguise fronts, creating massive interior lanes for blitzing linebackers while taking away quick throw lanes with his massive wingspan. Offensive lines could no longer simply slide their protections towards Sweat without paying a devastating price on the opposite edge, leaving tackles isolated on an island against Booker's explosive first step and relentless bend. The coaching staff didn't just accommodate Booker's growth, they weaponized it, crafting complex stunt packages and front alignments specifically designed to set him free against single coverage. The tactical advantage went far beyond simple stat lines or individual sack counts. It fundamentally altered how opposing offenses had to prepare for Chicago's front seven. When a defense possesses two dominant, three-down edge rushers who refuse to come off the field, offensive callers are stripped of their ability to run up-tempo play action or dictate matchups through personnel substitutions. Booker's emergence allowed Chicago to play disciplined, physical defense without showing their hand pre-snap, locking down the perimeter while keeping 8 men in coverage to blanket receivers. Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen knew they were no longer managing a young player's learning curve. They were wielding a complete, versatile defensive weapon who was reshaping the identity of the entire football team rep by rep. For Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears, Austin Booker's meteoric rise was far more than an exciting training camp storyline. It was the ultimate, definitive validation of an organizational blueprint built on patience, drafting, and developmental precision. When Poles took over as general manager, he made a clear promise to the fan base. Chicago would no longer be a team that frantically traded away top-tier draft capital and surrendered crippling salary cap space to cover up underlying roster holes. Instead, the franchise would construct a championship contender through disciplined mid-round drafting, elite internal player development, and relentless coaching. In an NFL landscape where front offices are constantly pressured to pursue shiny, expensive quick fixes, sticking to that core philosophy required immense conviction, and Booker stood as the living, breathing proof that the strategy worked. Selecting Booker in the 5th round was a calculated wager on raw, unrefined upside, and watching that gamble pay off in real time completely justified the front office's faith in their evaluation process. Scouting departments across the league had passed on Booker because he lacked extensive starting experience in college, overlooking his physical tools and high-level athletic traits. Chicago's staff saw a high-upside pass rusher who simply needed the right environment, professional strength training, and precise mechanical coaching to unlock his full potential. Booker's transformation from a developmental project into an unblockable 3-down starter validated every single piece of Chicago's internal ecosystem, demonstrating that their coaching staff could mold high-upside raw talents into game-changing superstars. The resolution of this entire saga carries a powerful message that echoes far beyond the walls of Halas Hall. Chicago didn't miss out on high-priced veteran stars. They had already uncovered their breakout pass rusher right on their own roster. While analysts debated which multi-million-dollar name Chicago should trade for, the organization had quietly cultivated an explosive 23-year-old defensive end who possessed the physical tools, motor, and technical growth to dominate games at a fraction of the price. The trade market freeze wasn't a sign of hesitation or a failure to close a deal. It was the ultimate act of operational confidence from a front office that recognized they already had the exact player they were searching for. As the Bears prepare to hit the field, the narrative surrounding the team's defensive ceiling has completely shifted. The defense isn't relying on a costly foreign band-aid to save their season. They are unleashing a hungry, homegrown monster who has earned every single first-team rep through sheer dominance. With Montez Sweat anchoring one edge and Austin Booker tearing around the other, Chicago possesses a fast, young, and financially efficient pass rush built to terrorize opposing quarterbacks for years to come. The message to the rest of the league is unmistakably clear. The Chicago Bears didn't need to buy a star on the trade block because they had already drafted and developed one of their own.